just because you got cheated on doesn't mean that you deserve better. This may not apply to everyone, but to a majority of people, I would say it does, honestly. There are plenty of instances where I see couples or broken up couples describe the dynamics of their relationship or the way it ended in this case and say it in ways that make it sound like nobody did anything wrong. In reality, many important details that would actually make those people seem less like victims are left undiscussed and unmentioned. And this may not be something that they're aware of. They may genuinely feel like victims that did nothing wrong at all. No incorrect mistakes, no nothing. But most of the time that isn't actually the case. Because like I said in the last video, you get what you attract. A large part of what that phrase is referring to is boundaries. Some boundaries are bendable, some are unbendable, also known as deal breakers. As you get to know someone, you will naturally push each other's boundaries, and part of your boundaries involves what you're willing to accept and deal with from the other person. Part of ensuring a happy relationship requires that all parties have a good understanding of their unbendable boundaries, to where they're willing to live by them regardless of who they're with, and react accordingly, most importantly, if those boundaries are being pushed or broken. Let me give you an example. Let's say there's a man and his unbendable boundary is to be in a monogamous relationship. He wants to maintain monogamy. Generally, he's not going to end up with some girl who is polyamorous, at least by the time it's made official. Now, some would say, oh, what about cases where someone seems to be abiding by that boundary but ends up breaking it? I'm sure there are cases where that exists, but that percentage, at least in my mind, is so negligible, it doesn't mean anything. Because whether you know it or not, there are plenty of signs indicating your partner's willingness to cheat, in this case, that you could and probably should have seen before you decided to make things official with them. These people in toxic relationships getting cheated on, getting treated like shit by their partners, when they post about it on TikTok and Instagram and shit, they may be victims, but it does not mean that they did nothing wrong. Some people who can't see the signs, most likely because they're inexperienced, have their boundaries taken advantage of by others. And to those people, I feel sorry for them. And yes, they deserve better. Most people, however, see the signs, are aware of the signs, recognize that those signs are violations of or prerequisites to violations of their unbendable boundaries, and they choose to ignore them or rationalize them so that they feel better about the fact that they can't act accordingly or that they won't act accordingly. And they end up in shitty relationships as a result that they post about on fucking social media. These people do not necessarily deserve better. And unless we know the entire story, which we almost never do if they're posting on TikTok and shit, don't jump to defend people and say that they deserve better when in reality they don't really deserve shit. When telling somebody they deserve better, you're giving them validation and reinforcing their actions, which is why they posted it in the first place, to be validated. If they're actually delusional or stupid and you validate them, they feel more inclined to do the shit they're doing. It's a first-class ticket to convince themselves that the stupid shit they do or think is actually some smart shit. And I like to think that if you post your relationship drama online, you're probably more likely to be aligned with the stupid people than the actual victims. They make real victims look like shit. What's even worse is that when people give these stories about how everything was okay, and then all of a sudden their partner cheated on them, it makes the person watching, who may be also in a shitty relationship like them, second guess themselves and say shit like, oh, maybe him saying this terrible thing about me to his friends is actually just who he is as a person and not because he doesn't actually give a fuck about me. It makes people ignore and give excuses for red flags from their partners. It also creates a gender divide where women will develop more distrust for men as a whole, rather than engage in self-reflection or rely on their own abilities to attract a man that will treat them well. It encourages an external locus of control where people feel like they have no control over their partner's actions and could end up as victims, as opposed to looking at themselves and going, hey, if I take care of myself, if I abide by my boundaries, and if I'm realistic about what I'm willing to take from my partner, I will ultimately attract the right person for me who I won't have to worry about doing wrong by me. That's pretty much it, honestly. Don't believe everything you see online. That's the moral of the story. You may see a story on TikTok, on Instagram, all this extra shit where you know it may seem to you like this person is really going through some fucked up shit, and it's not to say that they're not going through some fucked up shit, but you gotta really disconnect and not get emotional, because what you see online, whether you like it or not, is also affects the way you perceive reality. So you have to be always skeptical. Don't second guess your morals and what you're willing to accept and your boundaries. Don't second guess anything you're doing because of what some shit you see online. And yeah, that's pretty much it.